This opportunity for us to speak today with Mira Murati. Thank you so much for joining us, Mira. I put together a few questions for our discussion at the beginning that were informed already by things that people in the audience had sent at the time that they registered. But let me just quickly give a little bit of a quick bio here for people, although I think you don't really need much of an introduction. So Mira is the Chief Technology Officer of OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT and DALL-E. She leads the company's research, product, and safety teams, which work together to create safe and powerful AI that benefits humanity and has a positive impact on the world. Mira and her teams are pushing the frontiers of AI, of what AI can do, aiming to make it safer and aligning with human intentions and values. I wanted to say a little piece about Mira's career path, and I'll come back to that at the end of my questions, because I think for all of the students in the room here, it's quite interesting. So she managed the product and engineering teams at Leap Motion, led the design, development, and launch of vehicle products at Tesla, including the Model X, and also was involved in innovative programs in aerospace. She earned her bachelor's degree in engineering from the Dartmouth School of Engineering. So with that, I thought I'd start with a few questions here. And the first thing there, I just wanted to give you a chance to comment on a little bit, maybe to sort of level set the audience, was just you had quite a number of announcements this week, so maybe we'll focus on the GPT Builder interface and sort of really sort of a platform for creating your own ChatGPT, including for people with no coding knowledge, although that shouldn't be a problem in this room, and sort of how you're thinking about that with respect also to paying creators for their work, since that seemed to also be a piece of what you were talking about with the GPT Builder.
Hi everyone, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, that's great, thanks.
Well, thanks so much for having me. Very excited to be here. So yeah, as you know, we had our first day event on Monday, and we announced a lot of new things on the API, but also a new product interface, like you mentioned, that we're calling GPTs, and it's really a step in this direction of building AI agents that help us collaborate and basically teach us really how to collaborate with AI systems. And they're going to be everywhere, in our creative spaces, in our workspaces, and really, I think something that we won't be able to live without. But imagining a future where these systems are everywhere and operate autonomously is both really amazing, but comes also with a lot of risks and trepidations, and so we need to move carefully towards that world and try to understand iteratively what it looks like and build a more robust, reliable, and thoughtful path, as it's going to have a lot of implications for society. And so we want to make sure that this journey towards a world where agents are everywhere, AI agents are everywhere, is one that allows for continuous adaptation to this technology. And so in our strategy of iterative deployment, we decided to roll out the first iteration and learn from how people are using the GPTs and what they're doing with them. And just in the first couple of days, we have seen a lot of fun and creative uses of it, a lot of attention on tools like browsing and DALL-E, so it's just all really fun to see.
So I'm gonna already go off the script of the questions I had prepared, just because when you were mentioning sort of collaboration of humans and GPTs, this is something that some of us at MIT have been spending quite a bit of time thinking about. I think often today's AI is framed sort of as AI replacing people. And if you go back all the way to 1960, long before pretty much everyone in this room probably was born, including sitting on the Zoom, I'll include you in the room here. J.C.R. Licklider at MIT actually was already postulating that the real value from machine intelligence was going to be that the collaboration of humans and machines would produce results that are better than either one alone. And so I think it'd be great to hear your thought, since you're now really sort of starting to focus on collaborations and tools for people really collaboratively creating these interactive things. Just is that changing your framing from sort of AI as a stimulation of people to sort of replace them to something as a really collaborative tool? We're trying to get better outcomes than from AI by itself or people by themselves.
Yeah, I think for a significant period of time, we're talking about collaboration with AIs, these hybrid interactions, and really using AI systems as tools to elevate us. And in our day-to-day job, but also in our creativity, and maybe not everyone wants to work 40 hours a week. Maybe some people want to work 5 hours a week. And so, like, making things like that possible, that maybe before were not. But I really believe that we can have this future where, for quite some time, AI systems are tools that we collaborate with. And then at some point, they will get advanced enough. And there is a question of, how exactly we interact with these AI systems, and what do we want them to do, and what do humans focus on. But I think for quite some time, the goal is to give people access to these tools and make it very easy to use them. And it's great if you can program, but if you cannot program, then you should just be able to program in natural language. And that's what people can do with GPTs. So we showed a demo on Monday, where a few demos actually, where just in a couple of minutes, you can program GPTs in natural language to assist you with various tasks. And that's what we want to be able to do, to bring the powers of these superpowers to humans. And anyone can just, build these tools and use their creativity. They can prototype stuff very quickly, communicate with team members, like, designers or product managers can communicate their ideas very easily to the engineering team. They can iterate very quickly. So that's sort of how I imagine the day-to-day interactions to be. And, in a way, we're already there, in the way that we use ChatGPT or, Code Interpreter or Copilot that we launched a couple of years ago in collaboration with GitHub. So I think these are some good examples that give you a sense of how we're already collaborating and working with the systems. And then there is a question of, over time, how much do we delegate? And the nature of the tasks possibly becomes more and more abstract. But for now, I think we're really automating the part of that's kind of repetitive of our tasks, and also helping, using these tools to help with brainstorming, or usually I define it as like the first step of any particular thing that you're doing, whether you're an accountant or an analyst or a consultant or a designer. It's really that first step that these AI systems can be quite helpful with today.
Great, thanks. So I'm going to go to some of the things that came in beforehand from people in the audience, and I had a chance to review and try to kind of group together in some quasi-coherent way. So we seem to be in a world of sort of AI optimists on one extreme and AI pessimists on the other. Where do you place yourself in that, and how does that affect your leadership at OpenAI?
I'm definitely optimistic in general, and I think it's very important to have a sense of possibility and optimism, because things have a sense of being self-fulfilling as well. And it's important to have belief and faith that things are going to go well, but I'm not saying that one should be optimistic blindly. And with that optimism comes also, a large degree of preparation and being quite, I'd say, clear-eyed and open-eyed about all the challenges ahead. And there's, a set of immediate, urgent challenges that we're facing as we're releasing these technologies and trying to make them as accessible as possible. But also, predicting the capabilities and risks as we're preparing to train more and more capable models. And I think the foundational thing, kind of in the medium term, is really building the science of prediction. And we did this with GPT-4, and we're betting more and more on this, understanding how to predict the capabilities of the models that we're building. And with that, also preparing for red teaming, preparing for the risks ahead, and how to mitigate the risks that are brought along with more powerful capabilities. And it's sort of like, I'd call that like kind of medium-term risk, or as we go from urgent things to more long-term capabilities. And then in the far end, of course, we're facing questions around catastrophic risk and, these systems that are self-improving and extremely capable. And so how do we get ahead of that? What do we need to understand? What kind of research do we need to be doing today to be prepared for this unknowns? And we've, at OpenAI, we've invested quite a bit in what we call super alignment. And so it's this idea of doing a lot of research to understand how we align these very capable, increasingly capable models that eventually become, AGI or ASI eventually. And this is a extremely hard technical challenge, and we're investing quite a bit from compute perspective, but also in terms of just hiring a great team of researchers and giving them space to focus on some of these very uncertain and difficult research agendas.
So in terms of, given the importance of prediction, being able to predict risks that you were talking about, do you have, to share with people who are sort of not involved in, what you're doing inside the company, sort of examples of things where, either you were, surprised one way or the other in terms of your either ability or inability to predict risks, and sort of how should the world at large think about risk prediction and how well that works?
Yeah, so, if you think about GPT-4, it was a brand new frontier model a year ago, and we did very precise capability predictions ahead of time. We put in 6 months of work into safety before releasing, doing a lot of red teaming, doing a ton of evaluations, and then we proceeded to do this very controlled deployment where we rolled out to a set of trusted users, understood what they were able to do and what some of the risks of that were. And then over time, as we built more confidence about being able to handle the risks and mitigating them, we broadened up access to more and more users. But yeah, I think in terms of our core safety decision has been really building the science of prediction and following this strategy of iterative deployment. Before we even released big models, so let's say GPT-3, for example, we had been studying misinformation for a really long time, and but we didn't have, first-hand experience with it because we had never deployed such models. And so before we released GPT-3, we were extremely worried about the effects that it could have on elections and just misinformation at large on the internet. And not that that's not important, that's extremely important. But what we saw from actual deployment was that a much bigger risk was, spammy content, which is, still bad, but perhaps not as bad and not exactly what we expected. So we kind of reoriented our work then to be able to focus on those mitigations. But I would say, a lot of the things that we're dealing with right now, in terms of risks, to some degree, we had thought about and had predicted them many, many years ago, like let's say even 4 or 5 years ago, but you don't know exactly the degree to which the problem will be pervasive, important, critical, and how precisely it will impact things. Like, for example, education is something that, we knew GPT-4 and ChatGPT would have some effect, but we didn't know exactly how. So we started studying provenance of content and being able to detect what's AI generated, what's not AI generated. But we don't understand, the impact that these technologies are having on the education system and how things will evolve over time. And so we know there is some sort of impact, but we don't know exactly what, how, and so it's very important to actually continuously study this and be able to react and be able to kind of iterate on the strategy, on the technology, work with different parts of society that are affected by it and figure out some ways to gather input, not just from people that use the technology, but also people that are affected by it and are not necessarily using it. So it is quite complex in that sense because you need to coordinate so many aspects. It's a technology that affects everything. It's such a fundamental unit of things and changes the fabric of society. So it's it's like a global coordination task. It's just a really huge task.
And so maybe this is pertinent to the education space. I thought about it as a broader question before based on what people said, but what role do you see? It's a lot to take on in addition to developing these models and testing these models and predicting things, to really think through impact in various different domains. To what degree do you see, collaborating with academia or with other kinds of organizations who might be able to do things like help study how these things are being used and can be used in K-12 education or in other places? Are those things that you're looking to do to sort of build, either with other companies, sort of non-competitive consortia, with academia, to study some of these broader kinds of questions, to give you sort of a broader platform for thinking about risk?
Yes, for sure. I mean, we of course have a lot of responsibility as developers of the technology, but it's not really possible for a small group of people in an organization to figure out how technology will be absorbed by society and the entire infrastructure that needs to be built to make this, just really beneficial to everyone. And so I think one of the big benefits of ChatGPT was really bringing AI, the effects of AI and the experience of AI in the collective consciousness, because before then I think people obviously had a sense, but not everyone could just experience the power of these very advanced AI systems and know what it feels like. And I think that had an incredible effect because people weren't just reading about it or hearing about it. They could just feel it, experience it for themselves. And I think this really pushed governments all over the world into action to think about how to coordinate, organize, govern AI systems. And we've seen actually a ton of movement in the past year. Last week, the UK AI summit was held, where all the major AI developers were there, and thinking about voluntary commitments that organizations can make. And so I think this is a really inflection point for AI governance, and that's because it has sort of penetrated the collective consciousness, and there was an important moment. Now, when it comes to our role and how we work with various organizations, civil society, academia, and so on, we try to do as much as possible. And we collaborate with organizations like Code.org or Khan Academy, and try to empower them to build our technology, get their feedback. And they were helping us understand some of the very early use cases around AI tutors, and how to make them effective. And we got the feedback from educators, but now we're also working with a few universities just to understand how it affects things in the classroom, especially with ChatGPT. And so there is quite a bit of work that we're doing with various organizations, and I think there's obviously always more that we can do, but our priority is really to just make it accessible, easy to use, and to really just empower everyone to be able to use the technology and start thinking about how it impacts their specific domain, as we don't necessarily have expertise, say, in the domain of education, but we want to give people the tools to experience and understand it for themselves, and be able to gather that feedback and make the technology more robust or more helpful.
So with the race to develop and release larger models, no. Mira, do you hear me or no? Seems like not. Hello? Lights on. If you can hear me, it's fine. You hear me, Mira? No.
Very
faintly. Softly. All right, I'm going to speak really. I'm going to use my my 26100 lecturer voice. So with the race to develop and release larger models, how do we stop this from sort of becoming a race to the bottom on safety concerns? You sort of mentioned things like, the recent legislative part, people getting together and talking about this, but when realities of competition come to bear, often these things can be good intention. Somebody I learned a lot from in my life likes to say good intentions without mechanisms don't actually get anything done. So how do you think about mechanisms there for that?
Yeah, there are a few things. Well, one, I'd say this is why we spend a lot of time thinking about the structure of OpenAI, sort of anticipating a future where things would get quite competitive and AI would just have a very important place in the economy. And so we kind of changed the structure of OpenAI into this limited partnership, which is still governed by the nonprofit, but it allowed us to then, raise money so we could buy the supercomputers to be able to do our research and our work. But it's still governed by the nonprofit, and it has a limited cap, what we call a limited profit cap, and so that ensures that the primary objective is really achieving the mission, which is building AGI that really benefits all of humanity. And the structure, the mechanisms, the incentives are important. They're not everything, but they're really important. And so I'll start with that. But then I think, as we're deploying things, it's also very important to make sure that we get the things around governance right. And so right now there's a lot of debate around regulation, and we've been pushing for regulation of frontier systems that don't necessarily affect, the startups or innovation of small companies and so on, but to put some sort of degree of checks and balances and regulatory framework around models that are really at the frontier, and encouraging the government to think about regulating these models that have incredible capabilities. In the near term, I'd say, at OpenAI we just have a whole set of things that help us think about how to deploy safely and responsibly, and it's not really a one-stop. It's not just something that you add at the very end. It's something. It's integrated from the data, from point of view of the data into the algorithms, into building the product, into actual deployment, and looking at how people are using the AI, and then feeding it back into the technology, and having this full loop that we continuously iterate on. And that's really important, and also providing some accountability by, whenever we release some new technology, we have safety systems squared, we do a lot of red teaming. Often we publish the outcomes of the red teaming. And so I think, it's important for the industry to have some sort of standards around deployment, and what we have seen, I'd say, in the past couple of years, is that there is a lot of voluntary standard setting from the big companies. We saw this a bit with the White House commitments as well. But yeah, it's important to avoid kind of this race to the bottom. And I'd say, yeah, that's very important. And if we just focus on sort of the worst outcomes, I would focus on, if we have to focus on one thing, and like the worst outcomes, I would focus on the frontier systems and being able to work with governments and other AI developers to regulate the frontier models.
The executive order that the Biden administration put out a couple weeks ago certainly, it has a lot of breadth to it, but part of it is definitely looking at foundation models, and what they term dual-use foundation models that can have sort of potential defense kinds of uses. And how are you thinking about that executive order and how it's affecting what you're doing? It has reporting requirements and other things. How are you thinking about it, preparing for those?
Yeah, it's pretty fresh, so we're studying and looking at it and seeing, what it actually means in practice and what the effect of it would be. But generally, I'm very supportive of figuring out the appropriate regulation around frontier models. I think it's valuable to think of it in terms of capabilities and building the science of predicting these capabilities and determining any thresholds or regulation based on that. But this is just all very fresh, and internally we're looking at this and we're figuring out what it means and how to make sure that it's something that's practical. We don't want regulation and the actual science of doing things or the practical actions to be detached. So I'd say the short answer is that we're still reviewing it, but on principle, yeah, we definitely have been encouraging having some sort of regulatory framework around frontier models.
So there's another piece of that executive order that I'll sort of summarize in the following, and it's long. I'll summarize it as, using AI is not an excuse for, breaking existing regulations and laws. So that, if you make your frontier model available and somebody else uses it in a way, or either uses or misuses it in a way that's counter to other existing laws or regulations, it's sort of not an excuse. Do you see that as something that exposes you all to risk in terms of how people use things? Do you think that it's a part of the responsibility of these very general models is to have guardrails in there that actually help guard against misuse? Like somebody pretending to be a lawyer or pretending to be a doctor by sort of kind of consulting a general model, or those things that you think fall within scope? How do you see sort of teasing apart in some sense the amazing capabilities of these general models, and then the ways that they may be used for very good purposes, but also misused in a lot of different domains, and how the responsibility there kind of shakes out?
Yeah, so I think it's very sort of domain specific, use case specific. Like, of course, there's some common sense guidelines and guardrails around what's legal and what's not legal, but a lot of it, like a lot of the